Welcome back to the Offense channel. Now we are going to be covering the DAZN card that's just finished about 30 minutes ago. So it's 11:15 a.m. here in Australia. The DAZN card started approximately at 5 a.m. I wanted to get up at 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time to catch this card. And getting up at 8 today, I thought I was going to miss it. So luckily I got just up in time for the Savannah Mitchell versus Rankin undercard, and then I watched the George Kambosos card versus Lee Selby, and then obviously the main event was Oleksandr Usyk versus Derek Chisora. Now, let's start with the main event. The main event was a heavyweight, you could say title eliminator. The winner was going to fight Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua was sitting in the not in the corner, in the crowd. He was wearing all black with the Under Armour mask, looking quite dapper. But yes, he was watching on eagerly just to see who was going to get up on this one. Now, first few rounds, Derek Chisora, rounds 1 to 2 and maybe 4 looked very impressive. He looked like he was the weight bully. He was just moving forward, throwing his left hook, right hooks to the body, which is pretty much signature from every other fight I've seen him watch. He goes quite low. He squares up a lot when he goes to the body. And he was getting Usyk onto the ropes whenever he wanted in those first few rounds. Oleksandr Usyk, he looked very much, he didn't look comfortable. He looked very much out of his comfort zone, and he was just circling. He was getting tagged. He was getting tagged to the head mostly within the first 2 rounds, which was surprising because he is a counterpuncher. He's a boxer and mover, and you'd think Derek Chisora's game plan was going to go straight to the body. But Derek Chisora did a good job in mixing up his attack to the head and to the body, getting Usyk onto the ropes. Now, in round 3, I think Oleksandr Usyk started to come on a bit. The first 2 rounds, he actually looked gassed for some reason. And maybe he was just because he wasn't, he came out cold and he wasn't expecting the ferocious pace that Chisora was going to bring. But he got to the ropes and he felt comfortable in round 3. He started to pot shot away. He started to do his signature pivot with his southpaw position under Chisora's left hand, and he started to take the fight a bit away from the ropes and keep it to the center. So that was a good game plan. And middle rounds, it was a back and forth. There was a couple of good Derek Chisora rounds, but I felt Oleksandr Usyk was actually going to stop him in around 7 to 8 because there was a couple of shots landed that towards the end of the round, Derek Chisora, if there was any more time, he would have been counted out because he did walk back to his corner very, very, very wobbly. So it was very interesting to see Derek Chisora actually last the whole 12 rounds. So again, after the 6th, 7th round, it was pretty much a blueprint with Oleksandr Usyk sort of wheeling around the ring on his bike, pretty much tagging and effectively moving in and pivoting and getting his combinations off to the body. His signature body, right to the body, straight right up top, was working. And there were spots there where Derek Chisora was landing heavy body shots, but it didn't seem to actually slow Oleksandr Usyk down throughout the fight. I know the commentators were saying that it looks like Oleksandr was slowing down. I don't think he was. He looked quite comfortable. And the whole question was Oleksandr Usyk able to keep Chisora and stay for the whole 12 rounds while keeping this mountain of a man Chisora off him? And he did a good job. He obviously came away with the unanimous decision, and he's going to go off and possibly try and call out for Anthony Joshua, who was in the crowd there. And it was funny, he was calling him out after as the cards were getting collected. Now, moving on to the Australian versus the Englishman, Lee Selby. Now, this one was interesting. I actually thought that Lee Selby was going to win in my previous video, and it looked to be the case. So this was for the this is a lightweight IBF title eliminator. The winner gets to face Teofimo Lopez's IBF belt. Now, both men came into the ring with some pretty cool, interesting music, and there was a lot of staring and a lot of posturing by Kambosos. A lot of commentators were actually thinking that was overconfidence, his burning nervous energy. I think it's just his personality coming from Sydney. He's probably seen it all. No doubt Lee Selby has too, from the from where he's come from. But it was interesting to see that the commentators thought that Kambosos was coming off quite nervous. Now, again, going back to my prediction, I thought that Lee Selby was going to run rings around him, maybe get a controversial decision, and I did call it. I said I was hoping for Kambosos Jr. to win, just because a good win would mean that he becomes pretty much one of the, another well-known Australian sports figure. We had Jeff Horn, now we've got Kambosos Jr. if he does win. And also it sets up a great fight with him, an opportunity for him and Teofimo to fight in Australia. That's going to be a huge fight. Kambosos have stated that he wants to fight at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, which is where I am, so I've definitely got to visit that. But yeah, going back to the fight, I think that, rounds 1, 2, 3 were pretty much very close rounds. I think George Kambosos Jr. was showing that he could actually have great defense. Lee Selby came out jabbing. He was throwing 5 jabs. With 1 jab to Kambosos. Kambosos was looking to counterpunch, and it was strange. You'd think that when Kambosos was coming forward and having to, almost like a Chris Algieri type of fighter in Lee Selby, having to catch that boxer who has brilliant feet. Lee Selby's feet was light as usual, fast on his feet, brilliant all around the ring. And he was throwing the jab out quite convincingly. Now, it came across as one of those fights where you just wanted the come forward fighter to come and catch this guy. I'm not a fan of the whole running, getting on your bike, circling. Lee Selby was throwing a lot of punches, but you could tell his first thought was to get in and get out, and he used every single inch of that ring. Kambosos was actually effectively bobbing and weaving and not getting hit with a lot of shots. So that was one thing that maybe the judges thought. 1, Lee Selby was always moving backwards, and 2, he was only tagging Kambosos here and there with a lot of repetitive but effective jabs to the body mostly. Lee Selby didn't really go to the body too much of Kambosos, and even the commentators were actually agreeing that Kambosos Jr. had the more effective, more highlight-worthy punches. He was counter-punching effectively. He was looking to land that left hook, right uppercut, and both were effective in their defense as well. Like, I was surprised with Kambosos Jr. When Lee Selby did decide to move forward, Kambosos does show good footwork and he's able to step back and out of range. And there was some rounds there from 4 to 6 where one of the English commentators was saying, look, Lee Selby's throwing all these punches. He's thrown, almost 3 times as many punches, but he hasn't landed. Now, you had Andy Lee also commentating, who is a world titleist, and he was disagreeing with the commentator. He was saying that Lee Selby was winning quite easily and effectively, even when he wasn't landing. Now, how are you meant to win if you're not landing and you're going backwards as well? So that was one thing to note. The cleaner, effective punching again was Kambosos Jr., especially rounds 7 to 8 when he was using his jab, albeit not as much as Lee Selby. He was using his jab, and it was actually moving Lee's head back. It was snapping his head back quite quite often. So again, even if he threw the jab, Kambosos Jr. was more effective, and it just looked more telegenic when he threw his punches. Now, going into the 12th round, I had Lee Selby winning by a couple of rounds. I know the English commentators for DAZN had it much wider, maybe 4 to 5 rounds in favour of Lee Selby. But I just think that Kambosos was not throwing enough. He wasn't throwing enough to meet or counteract the amount of jabs that Lee Selby was. Now, if you're moving forward and you're landing the harder punches, but you're landing maybe 25% less punches, yes, you're more efficient. But to be honest, fighting in Lee Selby's backyard, I was obviously thinking you need to win. He's going to need to do a lot more than this. And I was rooting for George Kambosos Jr. to win, because obviously it's a great win for him. He gets to two young guns in Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos Jr. Two fast, heavy punches, round about the same weight, same height. They're going to go at it. That's a great opportunity. If it was Lee Selby versus Teofimo Lopez going forward, it was going to be the same exact thing. It was going to be Teofimo coming forward, trying to catch Lee Selby, and I just don't think that's an entertaining fight. So when the scorecards were being counted, they took a long time to count, and even when the commentator, the announcer, was able to see the cards, you could see him shaking his head. Now, the commentators were obviously saying it's very, very bad omen if the cards get taken a long time to get read out, and also especially if the announcer's shaking his head. So it did take a long time. Again, I had Lee Selby winning, but I did feel frustrated. I wanted George Kambosos to catch him, because it just, to me, it just makes out for a boring fight. Now, you have one guy wanting to fight and one guy just running away. Not running, but he was boxing. He was effectively boxing, and there was rounds where Lee Selby did come forward for moments in time, and effectively Kambosos was able to get out of range with his feet and using head movement. So the cards were read out, and Kambosos won by a wide margin on one. I've got to say, let's have a look here. The event, I'm just on BoxRec now. I'm just checking the scorecards, and it was scorecards. Phil Edwards, I'm assuming was the Englishman. He scored at 115, 114. Yuri, there was one guy from Russia, and I think another guy was from the Netherlands. So the Russian guy scored at 118, 110. And one guy scored at 116, 112. Now, funnily enough, I actually thought going into the scorecard count, when they read the Russian guy, I was thinking this guy 100% being a Russian, and I'm just painting the whole country with a broad brush, but I was thinking that this Yuri guy was 100% going to like the come forward fighter. He was going to favor the action fighter, because it is not very appealing when one guy is not trying to fight. He's trying to box and pick and move. So it was funny that his scorecard came in way heavy in favor of George Kambosos Jr. and the other European judge scored at 116, 112, which is very achievable. Obviously, even the English judge giving it 115, 114, it was a close fight. There's a couple of newspapers and websites, sports websites, that I did jump on straight after the fight. And most particularly, The Sun had it, 4 rounds in favour of George Kambosos Jr. So that's interesting that a UK magazine or a newspaper had it in favour of the Australian. So that's great for Australian boxing. I eat my crow going forward. I will be picking Kambosos Jr. in most of his fights that he goes for, and it's a great win for Australian boxing. And moving forward, he ups his career with a possibly life-changing opportunity against Teofimo Lopez, and he would go down in Australian boxing history as one of the greatest if he beats Teofimo Lopez. So, I'm just going to touch on the undercard, the female fight between Savannah, Marshall, and also Rankin. I do apologize if I don't know her surname, but it was Hannah Rankin. So, Hannah Rankin going into the fight, this was for the middle title, WBA female middle title. So, Rankin is a good buddy of Claressa Shields. She's also she started her boxing career doing white collar boxing, which is a boxing program usually in metropolitan areas where white collared office workers are able to train for a few months and then actually have a amateur fight under certain conditions with a crowd. It's pretty rowdy. It's usually got a lot of alcohol and it's a great night. Anyone that hasn't checked it out, you should do so. I've thought about doing it a couple of times, but you need to sell tickets, and I just don't think I know enough people in the city of Melbourne to sell, 100 or 200 seats. So definitely check that out. It's a great way to get healthy, and most cities, most capital cities in every country has a white collar boxing program. Now, Hannah Rankin had said that yes, she liked the white collar boxing and got her start through that, and then continued on after finding success. She actually is good friends with Hannah Rankin. Hannah Rankin is actually good friends with Claressa Shields, and she actually fought Claressa Shields back in 2018. So she fought for all her titles, so all the middleweight titles, and that would have been a great opportunity. But she lost on the unanimous decision, which is pretty spectacular. If you can go 10 rounds with Claressa Shields, you're doing something right. So she went in with Savannah Marshall. Savannah Marshall, this was at 158 pounds. And Savannah Marshall, as soon as she came in, she started doing this Tyson Fury style. It didn't catch on to me for a second until the commentators stated that her trainer is Peter Fury, which is Tyson Fury's former trainer. So there was that, and for the first 3 rounds, Marshall, being the more touted prospect, actually didn't throw anything. And I was thinking, wow, why is she not throwing? She's got this herky-jerky Tyson Fury style. She's got Hannah Rankin coming forward, and she's not throwing any punches. And I just thought, wow, okay, this is the type of fight that it's going to be. It's going to be Lomachenko versus Lopez again, where one person's not throwing any punches. But from then on, it was actually all downhill for Hannah Rankin. Savannah Marshall did start to turn it on. And when I meant turn it on, she was landing every single punch that she threw. She was landing uppercuts from distance. She was landing straight jabs, right hands, great uppercuts. One thing I did notice, because Hannah Rankin seems to be fairly square. She's not one of those side stance fighters, whereas Tyson Fury and his whole pedigree and style from Peter Fury is obviously like that. More of a slick boxer, and Savannah Marshall did show that slickness from the Fury camp, but she also showed some real toughness. She came in and actually stopped Hannah Rankin. I think it was the 6th or 7th round. So that was a great fight. It was actually more telegenic and more entertaining than what I thought it would be. So it's interesting to note that as soon as the fight ended, the commentators were on Twitter and Claressa Shields was going off. She was saying, "Don't put me near Savannah Marshall. I'll have a murder charge on me. That's how bad I'm going to hurt that girl." So that's a mega fight in the women's middleweight division coming up, if that can happen. And we shall see. Now, it's got to happen because both are title holders. Both are coming from... They both have great followings. Obviously, Claressa Shields, she has been touted as the GOAT greatest women of all time, which is a self-label she's given herself. But, you know, there's many that would agree with that. And then you have the Tyson Fury of English female boxing coming over to the US. That's going to be a great fight. So thanks for putting up with this long video. I wanted to get this one in really quickly, and it is going to be a cracker. Today there's going to be fights galore. We're going to have Inoue versus another Aussie, Jason Maloney, coming up. We also have the big one. We have Leo El Terremoto Santa Cruz versus Javante Tank Davis from the Money Team. So that is all coming on at 1 p.m. is Jason Maloney and Inoue on Top Rank. And then at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is in about 3 hours, just roughly over 3 hours, we're going to have the Tank versus Terremoto card. So here's hoping to that, and I'll keep uploading and keep everyone updated. Peace. Bye.